All right, welcome on into the Falls Count Anywhere podcast. Charlie Turner, Chris DiCarlo, John Restino, all here with you on this Labor Day weekend. Guys, it's like summer's over, right? Labor Day. Let me ask you this right off the bat. Is summer over September 21st, like it's officially, or is summer over once September hits? Or for me, summer's over once football kicks in. It's over, right? So it's basically over, right?
Yeah, yeah.
This week it's going to be 90 on Tuesday, so it's going to feel
well,
like.
Hey, yeah, the heat will still be there, but yeah, it's hard to believe it's already September. We're in the back half of the year here and rolling along here with the Falls Count Anywhere podcast. You know, somebody once said, when Labor Day weekend, when you're out grilling and you're out, enjoying the long weekend, they once said, remember the people that sacrificed to have this long weekend. And I said, wait a minute, no, that's Memorial Day. That's not Labor Day. Labor Day is for the people that work 9 to 5 every damn week. Go out and grill and get drunk because that's what it's for. It's Labor Day. So yeah, I always thought that was funny. Like, no, it has nothing to do with the military. This is actually just Labor Day. But yeah, guys, we of course we're always talking classic wrestling here on the Falls Count Anywhere podcast. And, we do a show once a month where we bring in a panel of experts, historians, and they give their perspective on some of the DVDs there and the footage that Chris has available to us. So we always enjoy that and their breakdown of the talent that we see from back in the day. So, Chris, go ahead and give these gentlemen their proper introduction there.
Yes, again, first off, we're going to welcome a great man. They're all friends of ours and friends of the show. Of course, his great father, legendary Gordon Solie, one son, Mr. Jonard Solie from North Carolina.
Thank you, guys. Enjoyed being back on your show.
Also, second wrestling historian of not just the AWA, but all the territories, our good friend from Minnesota, Mr. George Schire.
Good morning, guys. Great to be
George.
with you.
And lastly, but not least, our good friend from up in Manitoba, Canada, historian, Mr. Wes Maidment.
Good morning, everyone. Nice to be here with you all again.
Morning, Wes.
As you know, guys, 4 clips. And John, let's start number 1.
Okay.
No mistaking that gentleman there. One of the toughest in wrestling history. Well, that guy maybe, but talking about Harley Race, of course.
Okay, yeah, this is, I believe we're starting with the young, Rick Martel.
Oh, man, that was Rick Martel. Okay.
Against the King. Oh, probably just got mauled by Abdullah.
Yeah.
This was a classic match. Rick Martel, Tito Santana against the High Flyers. And of course, this one, champion versus champion from in Japan, 1985. And from the Meadowlands there against Nick Bockwinkel. So, gentlemen, that was our Rick Martel clips. So, a little bit about Rick Martel, if you will.
I'll go first.
Go ahead, George. Yeah, go ahead, George.
First. Well, you showed that first clip, Harley being introduced and wrestling Rick Martel. And I saw them wrestle. Strangely enough, we just talked before we got on the air. We talked about the Metrodome in Minneapolis when Wrestle Rock took place in 1986. And that was Harley and Martel in that match. Of course, later in Harley's career, a little bit later, certainly Martel had experience a little bit more. But what a match. And when I look back at that Metrodome show, I remember that being my favorite match. I told you guys that was the reason that I ended up saying I'm going. So Harley Race, he's on my list of favorite wrestlers. The guy could make any wrestler, no matter how bad they may have been, Harley could make that guy look like he was a superstar. And that's a credit to Harley Race and to any wrestler that can do that. He can make a broomstick look good. And that's the reason I love Harley Race. I saw him young in his career with Larry Hennig when they were a team here for 4 or 5 years.
Lucky you.
And he was a youngster then, but man, he was a bump taker in his early 20s, and he was a tough son of a gun. And, you know, the old story on Harley, if you're in a back alley and you need somebody to have your back, I'll tell you what, Harley Race would be a guy I'd hire to do it or want at my back because he knows no fear. So, and Rick Martel, such a seasoned wrestler, a really good one who I saw progress throughout his career. And certainly he deserved probably even more attention than he got. I wasn't fond of his later role, the last role with being the model.
Yeah.
But it was what it was. But Rick Martel was too good of a wrestler and a scientific, if you want to use that term, to show off those kind of skills to become a character. But it worked. So what do I know?
Yeah.
When-
I saw Rick at one of the Titans dinners in Toronto. I was so impressed with, he was pretty humble and really nice, signed right away. Always a fan, even just seeing him in pictures in the magazines from when he was really young in Hawaii and New Zealand. Really nice, put together, really nice. And I agree, George. I thought he was a great scientific wrestler. I remember reading a long time ago in one of Melcher's bulletins how he had put him down so much by saying it was that typical French Canadian kind of wrestling style where it's high spot, rest holds. And every match has high spots and rest holds. I mean, it's the way it is, right? I always liked Rick Martel. And when I got to meet him, I realized that one of the reasons why it came across was because he was a genuinely nice guy.
When you're talking about Harley having him, cover your back in an alley, he did have an instance down here in Florida at the Imperial Lounge. That's on Tuesday nights. All the boys would go there. It was the only place that Eddie would allow the baby faces and heels to be seen at together. But they were known they had to sit on opposite sides of the bar. Tiger Conway Jr. was in the bathroom and he was being harassed by 3 rednecks, and somebody came and told Harley. And Harley went into the bathroom and totally cleaned it up and left the other guy with his head in the toilet. He did it all, and Tiger just kind of sat there and just kind of like looked and watched, But Harley would definitely cover your back at any point.
I think I had told you guys the story, or I've told it on other podcasts, but in 1965, in February, Harley was involved in an incident here in Minneapolis. He and Larry Hennig had won the tag team title at the end of January of that year. And in February, they were at a lounge, the Chestnut Tree in downtown Minneapolis. And there were 3 black guys that were beating up on a woman in the lounge, pushing her around, shoving her around. And Harley was there along with Eddie Sharkey, Renee Boulay. There's probably another one I'm forgetting. But anyway, the manager of the Chestnut Tree had come to Harley and said, "Hey, can you maybe interject here?" Harley went in, and this made the newspapers, guys. And it was totally out of kayfabe. He went in and he took out 2 of these guys, literally cocked them right there. But the third one came up behind Harley with what was described as a penknife and got him in the back. And Harley was out of action for about a month. He and Hennig had just won the title. They had to have substitute partners for Larry. And Harley had for the remainder of his career, if you ever saw him in the back, he had this moon-shaped scar on his back. And they had described it in the newspapers that it was had come within inches of his heart, and that he had saved this woman, and he was a hero to the public. And the moral of this story is that when he came back to action a month later on All-Star Wrestling on television, Hennig and him come in, and they introduced him, and they were heels. I mean, like you would not believe. Pretty Boy Larry Hennig and Handsome Harley Race. Yeah. And they were heels. But Marty O'Neill, our great announcer, he introduced Harley returning from his injury, and the fans in the studio, all 150 of them, whatever they had in there, they were like a standing ovation cheering. And Harley, when the bell rang, Harley started the match. He went out and he just started clubbing the opponent, kicking him and stuff. And within about 10 seconds, I swear to you, I saw the match. I swear to you, the fans were boo, boo, boo. Harley said later on, he said, I knew I had to get my heat back.
Yeah.
That's what he did.
Nice.
But true story, that made the newspapers. I have the clippings for it.
Wow.
And he was just a tough stuff. Eddie Sharkey, I don't know if you guys are familiar with Eddie, but he told the story many times. He says, I was there, and he said, Harley has no fear. And he went after these three guys, 3-on-1. And he went after him, and he says he took the two out, and the third one got him from behind.
Let me ask you this, guys, because it's Harley Race. It's the two names. It's the two toughest. Harley Race and Haku. You got to pick one to take to a back alley. I mean, you really can't go wrong with either one, right? Those two guys.
One of them.
Yeah, I mean, tough as nails, right? Both of them.
Yeah, and the thing about Harley is that he wasn't really a wrestler. I mean, he wasn't your move, scientific move here, in and out. Harley was just street tough. And like I say, any wrestler I've ever talked to, Red Bastide told me that. Dick Beyer told me that Harley was, he just had no fear.
Just looked like he had like heavy fists, him and Haku, just heavy fists that if they caught you with one, good night, right?
And Harley knew the business so well and respected it so well that he understood that when he got in the ring, he knew what his job was, especially when he got into his championship years. He knew that his job was to make whoever the opponent was, to make that opponent look like an unbeatable force.
Yeah. That he could win the title, but he ain't going to.
And Harley knew how to do that. Of all the NWA champions, which technically was their formula in the day, they had to face both heels and babies, depending on what city they were in. So the NWA champion was playing this back and forth roles too.
A tweener.
And when Harley got in there, no matter who it was, I mean, when the fans left the arena, they felt like their baby face, he got ripped off.
Yeah.
And that's what made a great champion.
Yeah. No, he was brutal in the ring.
Yeah.
But outside the ring, he was the nicest guy in the world.
Nice guy. Yeah.
I got
as most of the heels were, guys.
Yeah.
Nice guys outside.
Well, it also seemed like, your baby faces back in those days were so set on themselves that fans even had a hard time getting autographs from them. Yeah. But the heels were always there. They didn't mind signing autographs and everything. I guess it's just because they were heels, and they weren't getting the attention, but that's what their job was, to get people to hate them. And Harley did a great job at that. Harley asked me one time to drive. Well, I was driving Jerry's car up to Atlanta, dropping it off. And then I had to fly to St. Louis and pick up Harley's Trans Am that he had refixed. And I made it back from St. Louis to Atlanta in one day. And that car moved.
Well, he was known for his speed.
Yeah. You know why?
Why?
The story is because his wife and him were in a car and she was killed.
Yeah.
And from that point on, and I think it was a train hit him. And from that point on, he always decided he was going to drive fast. Well, when I got back to Florida, he actually was going from Tampa to Clearwater across the causeway, and he was going over 100 miles an hour, and he woke up a sheriff that was on the side of the road Yeah. And the sheriff tracked him down and said, "How fast were you going?" And Harley told him, and he says, "Wow." He says, "I'm not giving you a ticket, but slow it down." You know?
Wow.
But, that was Harley. He liked to go fast.
Yeah.
Wow.
Larry Hennig told me, and it was funny. He actually told me in 2017 at an event we were at, and we were talking about Harley because they remained friends throughout their lives. And he told me the speed story too. And he said, back in the day, I told Harley, "I'm not riding with you. You're not driving. I want to live." He said,
Yeah.
Harley he put the pedal to the metal, and
Yeah.
he was going. Can we mention the Rick Martel thing again? Back with the High Flyers.
That was a good match.
I sat ringside for the St. Paul match they had against Santana and Martel. And, you know, typically a babyface versus babyface match or tag match, sometimes they can leave a lot to be desired. And in typical cases, sometimes the fans will have to pick one team over the other, you know, or one wrestler over the other, and kind of. This was a match where I would say it was the best, the absolute best baby versus baby tag match I ever saw. I enjoyed it. And if you ever talk to Greg Gagne, he will tell you, because he has mentioned it to me several times, he will tell you that he and Jim both loved those matches they had with Rick and Santana. Rick and Santana were a great team. You know, I think they were so good in the AWA for their short run as a team that you saw that later on, Vince Jr. hooked them up in the WWF when it was still F. And he hooked them up. And what were they? The Strike Force? Strike Force,
yeah.
And I laughed when he did that, because I said, you know, that's really, he just took Vern's team because they were that good. They were very good.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Great stories there, especially one we never heard from Jonard. That was awesome about Harley speeding.
Yeah.
John, let's roll our second one. Speaking of the Metrodome, Wrestle Rock 86, here we go. Two baby faces again. Wyndham and Rotundo against the Fabulous Ones. Here we see the Rock and Roll Express against the Fabs.
You think Fabs there?
The Fabs, yeah. Fabs. They called them the Fabs. Fabulous.
Fabulous, yeah. As in fact, got it. I don't want any hate groups coming after us. You know?
Yeah. I mean, here you got talk about two baby faces. We got two heels here, Tully and Gino Hernandez against the Grapplers. Here's an odd one again, two baby faces, Rock and Roll Express against the British Bulldogs. Definitely a rare match. And here we see the Midnight Express against the original Midnight Express. Road Warriors, of course, against Demolition.
Oh, with Crush.
Yes.
Third member there, yeah.
Here we go again, two baby faces, right? Sting, Lex Luger against the Steiners.
Was that Japan? Yeah, it was Japan. Okay, yep. Right, was that a match in Japan there, Chris, that last one?
No, that was Bischoff saying in the United States. But
Gotcha. Okay.
That was basically our highlight of rare tag team matches. And of course, George, we talked about the first one there in the Metrodome, but a lot of faces versus faces, heels versus heels there.
That Metrodome one that you mentioned, it was interesting because we just talked about two babyface teams with the Flyers against Martel and Santana, and the fans did not boo either one of them. They both remained favorites. There was no picking. I will tell you that in the Metrodome match, oddly enough, this was like one of the first, well, this was the first time that Rotunda and Wyndham had come in. That was after their run out east. And the Fabs had been gone for a while, but they had been here, and they were extremely popular when they were here in 1984.
Mm-hmm.
Well, in that match at the Metrodome, the Fabs were the heels. The fans booed them. It was interesting. I was surprised because they had been gone for a while, but against Rotunda and Wyndham, who now we're getting national exposure because, you know, that was in 1986 and pay-per-views had been around for a couple years. And of course, McMahon was showcasing them. Yeah. So the Fabs were heels. I also thought it was kind of interesting. I'd like your take on this. The Road Warriors finally going in against the Demolition, which, well, obviously Crush was in there, but they were the ripoffs. Demolition was originally. I mean, most people admitted that
right.
The Warriors weren't available at the time. So, yeah, it's interesting on those matches how the fans will have to pick a favorite. I love Gino and Tully. I saw them together as a team down in Houston.
Yep.
Many years back. And I was very impressed with both wrestlers. And that was before Tully had hooked up with the Four Horsemen conglomerate and all that. But Gino was a heck of a talent. It was sad that he let his demons get him and didn't hang around with us. But he was a good talent.
Yeah. Also, if you notice, I mean, I noticed that the tag team matches back in those days compared to today were so much more interesting because they really got into the fight and everything, where today it's all just too staged. And they just were constantly going after each other. And the referees played a much bigger part back in those days. I mean, they're everything, especially when they're telling them how to do the rules and saying you can't throw them out, you know, and everything. They went through so much more, checking their outfits. Made it more believable that they're checking for things that, you know, they'd be carrying on them. And that's just a big part. And if the referees today just did a little bit more of that, they would add a little bit more, what do I want to say, intense action into the whole thing. You know, people would be going, okay, great. They're checking to make sure they're not cheating. And they don't do that anymore. They don't go like, I'm getting something out of my pants and, you know, loading up and then doing something. So I just find that the action back then was just so much more exciting to watch.
I'll give you 4 words, Jonard, that describe exactly what you're talking about. 4 words: 2 of 3 falls.
Yeah.
That is what made, and Wes, I bet you'd agree with this. This is what made a tag team match so good, a 2 of 3 fall match, where you could tell stories within those 2 of 3 falls. Even if the third fall ended up in a double disqualification or a DQ or whatever it was, those first 2 falls and the referee getting involved, they had a chance to tell the story. And as we got to the end of the 80s, you know, 2 of 3 fall matches, not only for tag teams, but singles matches, kaput. Lost art.
So we remember the 2 out of 3 matches, and, you know, because I like looking at ads and clippings and stuff, you'll see cards, and my podcast partner on mine always asks me, they only have 3 matches. They were all 2 out of 3. The opener was 20-minute, and it went to a draw. Not all the time, but sometimes. Yeah. The next match was the tag, and it was 2 out of 3, and it could be 60 minutes. 60 minutes. And then there was the main event, and that was usually 2 out of 3 falls also. So there was a massive build there. And George, I agree, and Jonard, you probably agree too, that when you got a tag match back in the day, and it's 2 out of 3 falls, team number 1, whatever their specialty hold, maybe one of the guys was a sleeper guy. He gets to put his hold on. And then that other fall, the other team one of their guys gets to put their hold on, whether it's a heel or a face, right? So they get to showcase and I told you I was going to put him to sleep. I told you. And yes, it was only the first fall, but he did what he said he was going to do. Yeah. And that built so much. The 2 out of 3 falls, no matter, like you said, George, whatever the ending was, it built so much for the whole match. I saw there was a British Bulldogs match versus the
Rock and Roll.
Chris, I would love to see that match. I've never seen that match. That to me would be a great match to see. I love the Rock and Roll Express. They're fantastic ultimate baby faces, as in not the biggest guys in the world. They made their opponents look so great by getting the shit beat out of them all the time.
Yeah, that was a classic. Go ahead, Jonard.
It was funny as my wife, and just to go off wrestling for a second, my wife and I were watching the championship of Jeopardy, and they have a 3 wins and you win. Okay. So each night somebody different seemed to win and everything. So it just kept it, instead of being a one-time, win and you're the champion, they made it more interesting and brought back the thoughts of the wrestling, the 3 falls.
Oh yeah.
Well, and it's interesting, guys, because when I first started watching wrestling seriously in fact, we're in September 1959. That's when it happened. I was always enamored with tag teams for the very reasons we're talking about.
Yeah.
When you had the 2 heels and the 2 babies, and God forbid you had 4 heels. I mean, pandemonium's running wild, right?
Right.
The idea that the referee can miss the tag of the babyface to come in, and in the meantime, while he's getting the babyface out of the ring, the 2 heels are beating the bejeebers out of the other babyface. I mean, and the fans are yelling and yelling, and the referee's oblivious, doing his job. And, he misses the 4. And, you mentioned pulling the object out of the trunks. And,
yeah, that's kind of a lost art. They don't do that a lot anymore, where the referee's getting distracted and they make the tag, and it's like, well, no, the referee missed it, so it doesn't count. I haven't seen that in a long time. That's a good point there.
And absolutely. And Wes, you pointed out that you could have a 3 or a 4 match card, and if you had a tag team match that was 2 out of 3 falls, I mean, that's all you needed, man.
Yeah.
And a lot of spot shows, in a small gymnasium or wherever they put them, they'd usually have a tag team match. A lot of times they'd have a tag team match main event.
Yeah.
Well, 2 of the guys in the tag match would wrestle each other in the opener.
Yeah.
And the idea is they would have unfinished business, man. They went to a no contest or whatever it was. So then they'd have the middle match, whatever it was. And then they'd have that main event, and then you're going to settle the feud from the opener. So they got the fans that probably weren't regular TV viewers into it by doing that.
Yeah.
And I definitely say that tag team matches, they had to be 2 out of 3 falls to be good.
Yeah, I agree totally.
And on a side note too, guys, making a return to wrestling is Paul Ellering. The rumor has it that Triple H is bringing back the Authors of Pain. Paul Ellering managed them in NXT, then he kind of disappeared off the main roster for a while, as did the Authors of Pain. Triple H is set to bring that team back with Precious Paul Ellering. I think that's pretty awesome. Paul Ellering still going strong and managing that tag team. So very, very cool to see him in 2023.
Yeah.
Guys, we're going to take a quick break here. We're going to check in with our sponsors. We got a couple more clips on the back end here to talk about. So let's check in with them. We'll be right back.
Digits 988 can save a life. If you or someone you know is having thoughts of suicide or experiencing a mental health or substance use crisis, 988 provides connection to free confidential support. There is hope. The Lifeline works. For 24/7 confidential support, just call, text, or chat 988.
All right, welcome on back to Falls Count Anywhere. This is Charlie, Chris, and John here with you with our panel this month of George Schire, Wes Maidment, and Jonard Solie. Gentlemen, so far it's been going great here, and your insights on some of these clips here. We enjoy it so far. It's great stuff.
All right, let's roll another one, John. This is our highlight clip I call Feuds.
Wow, a couple of beasts right there, huh? Bruiser and Dula.
Always a bloodfest. Of course, the assassin and Dusty Rhodes. Here we see Big John Studd under the mask taken from Japan, because I couldn't use any other footage, but it was Big John Studd and Andre the Giant. And then we see Wahoo McDaniels and Greg Valentine. Also, Wahoo feuded with his father, Johnny Valentine. Speaking of feuds, of course, classic tag team feud here, the Midnight Express against the Rock and Roll. Oh, gotta love this one. The Masked Superstar.
Hearts Unknown.
Of course, Flair, Dusty over the years in all the territories. And then, of course, we see Hogan and Flair. This was from Australia. And Mad Dog Vachon against Jerry Crusher Blackwell. Guys, classic feuds there. A lot of stories there for sure, right?
Oh, for sure. You know, the one thing I always think about in Dusty Rhodes is why he wasn't a reigning champ for a really long time like everybody else is that he didn't need to be the world's heavyweight champ. He brought a crowd with him.
Yeah.
And always, any of his shows that he was in, and especially when he was in the main events, they always had sold out crowds in Florida.
You bring up a good point when you say that about why he wasn't a champion. You know, I think that goes for a lot of guys that brought the crowds with them and they didn't need the title to be the champion. And unfortunately, in hindsight, I guess some people would say that was the rationale that Vern Gagne had with Hulk Hogan when he was challenging Nick Bockwinkel for the championship for a couple years. Nick was such a great draw as champion, and Hogan made a better challenger. And the referee missed the screw job, you know, and the whole thing. So, excuse me. So I think that's the reason, you know, Dusty didn't need the title to draw the fans in.
Yeah.
One of the things that I noticed when you talk about the Brody versus Abdullah, I got to see those two as a team when they managed by Sheikh Adnan El Casey. And they were a team, and they turned on Jerry Blackwell. That's how Jerry Blackwell did his face turn. And to this day, of all my years of following wrestling, that particular match, it was a battle royal, and Blackwell, Brody, Abdullah were in it, and the Sheik got them to turn on Blackwell, who was managed by the Sheik. And it was after the match was over. Blackwell had won the battle royal, but after the match was over, 20 minutes, guys, I'm not kidding you, 20 minutes was an in-ring beatdown from the Sheik, Abdullah, Brody on Blackwell, who was being saved by the fabulous ones, Kurt Hennig and Dusty Rhodes, who was in for the one night for the battle royal.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
The fans and I never saw a beatdown like that in my life. Jerry was just beat to you can't believe it. And the fans, 20,000 strong, were yelling, Jerry, Jerry, Jerry. And then he had matches against Brody after that. Abdullah was gone by then. But great.
We saw Dusty in Toronto quite a few times, and it was always a thrill, and 100% agreed with you guys. I don't know what he was like. I can only imagine. I can't imagine actually, Jonard, what he was like in the Southern States. But the first time I saw him in Toronto, it was I think the third match from the top, and it was incredible. He just came out and he stood on the steps at Maple Leaf Gardens, and the place was just electric. As they say, blew the roof off the house or whatever.
Mhm.
It was him and Vers Patera, I think, and it was regular Dusty match. But on the same note, you got to see Dusty live. And he'd only made like a few, maybe one appearance before that in Toronto, other than when he was a heel with Murdoch in the 60s. So it was pretty exciting, and he'd already completely turned babyface by then, and it was magic. We could talk about Dusty forever because he was just that good, and he didn't need the belt. He didn't need the belt.
Yeah. He when he and Murdoch were wrestling in Florida, I mean, they were just two badasses that would tear up the ring. And then when he switched over to Dick Murdoch as his partner, and not Dick Murdoch, Dick Slater.
Yeah.
Slater was another guy that you'd want in your if you were in an alley fight, because he was just brutal. And it's just a shame the way he ended up ending his life in a nursing home. But he and Dusty worked really well together. But when Dusty was heel, everybody just really hated him in Florida. But boy, when they turned him to babyface, he just went to town. And then from that point on, he was always a babyface. And the son of a plumber, the American dream. And he just got the crowds. Just when he would come in people just were screaming for him.
Well, you could see it at some of the tapes if you watch the matches from Madison Square Garden when he's going up against Superstar Graham. They'd never seen him in New York City. It was like, holy smokes. And they're fantastic matches because those two guys were so good at doing what they did.
Yeah.
I'd point out, now you just mentioned, West, about Rhodes and Superstar and their matches against each other, how good they were. I had the opportunity to see them both team together, Rhodes and Superstar, against Baron von Raschke and Horst Hoffman. And that came out of the fact that the Germans had turned on Superstar, who was one of our top heels at the time.
Yeah.
And he brought in, as he was referring to him at the time, I'm bringing back the Stardust, Dusty Rhodes. And Dusty became a baby here. And he was way over, but he wasn't sticking around. He was, really spending a lot of time down in Florida at that time. But yeah, great matches, whether they team together or wrestle each other, Superstar and Rhodes. I wanted to touch on the Flair versus Steamboat clip that you had there, Chris.
Yeah.
I saw them wrestle. First of all, I saw both wrestlers make their pro debuts coming out of the Vern Gagne camp.
Okay.
Rick Steamboat was Dick Blood when he started, which kind of a wrestling name would be cool if you think about it.
Right.
But he was too much of a baby face. But I saw the match that I really remember, and it was kind of like where it was the last time I paid attention to pay-per-views was 1993, and Flair and Steamboat exchanged the NWA title there. And their matches, man, wow. I loved that match. That was the pay-per-view. And I really enjoyed their work, and you could tell that they really respected one another. And I'm reading the Ric Flair book by Tim Hornbaker, and I'm telling you, I feel like I'm sitting ringside with Ric Flair's matches. Hornbaker, by the way, did a great job on this, and I'm not finished with it yet. But he actually asked me to do a review, and it's going to be a good one when I'm done, I'll tell you. So I wasn't always the greatest Ric Flair fan, but I like Ric Flair and what he did for the business. So yeah, good one. And Steamboat match is great. I liked also, and I'd like to get you guys' opinion. I like the idea of the Mr. Wrestling 2 against Bill Eadie as Masked Superstar, because I thought both of those guys especially Superstar. Man, I think he was totally underrated. I wished he'd have been around 10 years earlier and had a much better run as a mask guy.
Yeah. You don't see mask guys very much anymore.
Well, how do you break kayfabe?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. The lost
20
art.
seconds, 20 seconds after they introduce them, their name would be all over the internet.
Right.
There's only one in the NWA with Billy Corgan, and that's Scion, managed by Austin Idol. Is the only one I see anywhere.
Yeah. But then the Scion thing, who knows him? Back in the day, if Mass Superstar came into the Twin Cities, Minneapolis here, in 1985, he was here for a short time, but nobody knew who he was. That internet thing wasn't there yet. But he comes in today. Not only that, the dirt sheets, Meltzer, etc., they're going to broadcast it all over before he comes in. So yeah, the mask gimmick is dead. And that is sad, because there was nothing better for wrestling than that parts unknown, that highly populated community of masked people.
Right.
Well, especially the time when Dusty was
the whatever in the head. I love the mask guys, and whether we saw some really great babyface mask guys. I know up in Toronto we had Guy Mitchell, who wrestled as the Stomper for a while as a face, and ended up feuding with the Sheik and, quote, losing his mask, but he was everywhere else. But Johnny Walker was a short guy in my estimation, but talent, and he could get over so well. Watching video now on him as the babyface or a heel, and I loved him as a heel in the UWF. That was marvelous against Terry Allen.
Yes.
But yeah, Bill Eddy is a mass superstar. Everywhere he went, you could see he was one of those guys also that you could practically see the talent coming out of him, pouring out of him, because he's just that good.
Well, and Bill Eddy also was one of those guys that was so good on the microphone. That was always important to me, with that the heels, babies too, but the heels that could come out and deliver that 2 or 3 minute promo, and they either got you to love them or hate them, and run to the box office to see them get their butts kicked, or see someone beat them. The thing about Johnny Walker, I think a lot of people forget the fact that, he was Johnny Walker as Johnny Walker for a lot more time than he was actually Mr. Wrestling 2. Yeah. And Jonard, you might remember this. He was actually under the mask as a grappler, the grappler in Florida for a while.
Okay.
Back around, I want to say 1970-ish, give or take.
Late 60s, maybe.
I think you're right. Yeah.
Yeah. He was the grappler.
One of the worst hangovers of my life was because of Johnny Walker, but that was Johnny Walker Black, and that was that was a rough morning, guys.
You had a rough night with him, right?
Yeah, well, but I know Jonard wants to talk here, but Jonard, my question to you though is, with your history and your great dad, did you meet either one of those gentlemen or know him?
I met Johnny Walker, but the other guy, no. It was just depending on when I was down at the Sportatorium and what was going on. Because when Dad ever had a party, the only wrestlers he ever invited to his parties would have been Jack or Jerry Briscoe. When he left the Sportatorium, he was home, and that was his life. But he'd be on the phone the whole time talking to him at nighttime during dinner. And the shame at that time they didn't have the hookups of the phone with the speaker, so you could just talk and eat without having to hold the phone. But yeah, I had more interaction when I went to the Imperial Room. It's like when Jack Briscoe lost the title to Terry Funk in Miami, and then the next match was back in Tampa for a rematch for Jack to get the title back, and of course he didn't. Because Jack was done. He was tired of being the champion, and it was time that he wanted to pass it on. But it was funny. That night we had a young Ric Flair there at the table, and we had Dusty and Jack, and there was a guy from a real estate office that Jack was friends with. And Dusty told me, he said, I couldn't sit at the table. He said, because I couldn't keep up with the boys. So I said, what do I have to do to keep up with the boys? And he said, well, how about drinking a bunch of shots? So I said, fine. So I did 5 shots of vodka in less than a minute. And
Oh man.
so I was allowed to sit at the table, but Dusty also had to pay the bill and give the bartender or the waitress a nice big fat tip, which he was kind of cheap on at times. And then afterwards, we ended up going to, and Rick was there, like I said, but Rick didn't go with us afterwards. We all went back to Dusty's place and we drank beer. And I was sitting at Dusty's desk and he came in and he said, "You got to get out of the desk, out of my chair." And all the guys said, no, he deserves it. We sat, we drank beer. And then at one point I said, "I'll be back." Went and threw up.
Oh man.
It was 6 o'clock in the morning when we left.
Wow.
Oh boy.
So yeah, I had one of those hangovers, and I had to go open up the body shop, the Briscoe Brothers body shop, and Jack was such a smart ass. Because I said, "Jack, aren't you coming with me?" He says, No. I said, "I own it. You work there."
Yeah, the right answer.
Yeah, so I went and opened it up, and then he called. He said, "Bring me back some coffee." So I brought back some coffee, and the guy, he wouldn't let me in the door. He kept holding the door, and I kept pushing. So we sat at the table. He was at one end, I was at the other end. He said, "So, you feeling kind of bad? You can't really stay up with the big boys." And at that point, he was taking a sip of coffee, and I hit the table right at his chest. He was like, "I guess I deserved that one." But
Awesome.
those were some great times back with those guys. That's when I really got to meet more of them and party with them, like with Andre and Tony Charles. But
That's awesome.
yeah, and it's a shame that we had that passing this week of Terry Funk and Brett Wyatt. Yeah, 2 good guys, really good guys.
Yeah. Okay. John, let's roll our last clip.
I'm going to get rid of Blackjack Mulligan, and Ric Flair will hand over $10,000 to me.
This is speaking of great announcers in the pro wrestling sport. This we see highlighting Mr. Bob Caudle.
Voice of Mid-Atlantic Wrestling. It's so good to talk to you here.
Well, I tell you, that goes back a long, long way. Bill, I can't remember how long ago it was, but we go back a long way.
We do. I think I first met you in like 1973 or 1974.
Yeah, about right.
When I came down here.
The man himself, Mr. Cottle, I do believe we've had an outstanding array of talent, but next year, it's not here yet, but it's coming.
That's right. It's been a great one. Fans, it's going to be even greater next year. We hope to see you then.
We had seen each other.
Tony, it's great to see you. It's got to be 25 years at least. Yeah, absolutely. And I got to tell you, hey, you look great, guy.
Thank you very much. And Jim Ross and I, JR and I have talked many, many times. I owe him so much. We talked about the time that he negotiated my contract with Turner Broadcasting for me because he wouldn't shut up in a meeting. But JR, this is tremendous seeing you, tremendous seeing the fans. What a weekend this has been.
It's been great, Tony. Reconnecting. It's really an amazing opportunity to interact with these folks that really paid our bills. They supported us, and I think a lot of entertainers, broadcasters, athletes sometimes forget where they came from. And I know the 3 of us have never done that.
I know, and people don't realize this, but you and I were roommates for quite a while.
We were, and I can tell you.
Nice.
So, of course, one of the great voices of Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling, Mr. Bob Caudle.
He was a great guy. My dad really liked Bob and everything. We were going to give Bob the Gordon Solie Award, but his health has really gone down, and so Jerry decided that would not be the best thing to do to try to bring him out. I still think he deserves to be on the plaque, even if somebody's passed away. They did a great job. I think they still need to be on a plaque, so people know who they are and they don't forget them.
Absolutely.
Well, I would say amen to that. And, a lot of people forget that the wrestling announcers back in our era, my era for sure, they were the people that the fans tuned in to see, be it the Bob Caudles, the Gordon Solies, the Marty O'Neills, the Mean Genes, and lo and behold, even Vince McMahon Jr. back in the day in that territory. And Hank Renner out in California. It's so many great announcers, and they deserve to be recognized, whether they're here with us or not. They were the ones that got the fans. I mean, I know I went to different territories, and there was nothing better when our Marty O'Neill would say at the end of the programs of All-Star Wrestling, he'd say, "All right, fans, run, don't walk, to get your tickets."
Yep.
And after the show you just saw, you got off your duff and you were at the ticket office or on the phone, whatever it was back in the day. And all of the announcers were so good. In St. Louis, I remember they had a guy named George Abel, and he was with Mickey Gargiola, who I had a chance to meet, both of those guys. They did wrestling at the Chase for a lot of years. And super guys. Just, they deserve to be recognized, whether they're passed on or not.
Yeah. I think there should be an award for just podcasters because they are today's future in the way of communicating and getting the wrestlers.
Well, are you saying we got the first 3 or 4, 5, 6 right here?
Wow, you guys rock.
Oh,
you guys, I'll stand back.
I am among many great people. I love it. It's great.
I love. I don't know if you guys know. I have 5 wrestling history pages on Facebook, and I love to put over the announcers because so many people text me and they say, "Oh, Wes, don't you have a picture of this guy, or don't you have a picture of that guy?" Like I posted a picture of Kiniski with the Los Angeles announcer, Louis Montagna or something like that. I can't remember his name. It's something like that. And it's like, it brings back instant memories for people. Ron Morier in British Columbia was an announcer for All-Star out there for a long time. In Toronto, we had Lord Athol Layton for quite some time. And then we had Billy. And Detroit had Lord Athol Layton also. So some of these guys they weren't in the ring, but they were just as well known as the wrestlers. And like you said, George, they brought the people in. They brought the people in. It was their job, even though they were standing there with a microphone in their hand, it was their job to sell the matches, to make sure that the guy said the right things and what have you. Bob Caudle, when we first started getting in, and I don't know, maybe Chris, you remember, when we first started getting Mad Atlantic up here in this area, it was incredible. Like, God, we've seen these guys on the magazines for so many years, and all of a sudden we're seeing them on TV, and we saw Caudle, and I guess eventually we saw Rich Landrum. Weaver did it for a while.
David Crockett.
And David Crockett, yeah, for sure. And it's just so exciting to know that, yes, you're seeing the TV matches, but you're also seeing those famous people you've seen pictures of your whole life. Gordon Solie, like, in Jonard, in Canada, no one knew who Gordon Solie was unless you read magazines where he was mentioned sometimes, or once. He was, I think, one of the most famous announcers that got in the magazines all the time back in the day. There wasn't too many guys that had their picture in, and obviously with watching videos now, everybody knows who he is, and we should respect probably the best announcer of all time. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and you mentioned Lord Layton. He in his own right was an established wrestler and a good one back in the day, transitioning into being the announcer. And what about Billy Red Lyons? Yes. I mean, he became "Don't You Dare Miss It."
Yeah,
line that you
we're familiar with that up here. Absolutely,
right. Well, what a great wrestler in his day. And then Lord James Blears, who had a historic wrestling career and went on to be, quite the announcer in his day.
Yeah.
Paul Bosch, so many guys that really, the list is endless.
Define
territory. Well, we're going to highlight one each month. So, of course, we started back before with Jonard's great dad, Mr. Gordon Solie, that we love. And today was Mr. Bob Caudle. Next month, we'll pick somebody else.
That's good.
John, you chime in there, of course, with Wes. We remember, of course, Mid-Atlantic, Maple Leaf. Well, we got Maple Leaf first, and then we got Mid-Atlantic at 3 o'clock. Right, John?
Yeah. No doubt. Norm Kimber's voice is still in my head from ring announcing. So, I mean, I can still hear. Anytime I hear it, I instantly, look.
Yes.
And then of course, I mean, the guy that I can never. I mean, he's had to be just a unbelievable Okerlund. My God,
Mean Gene,
he just
absolutely.
was
Yeah.
unreal the way he made those guys. He probably back in '85. I mean, he was as big a star as Piper in those.
Sure.
So I don't know, but I can still hear Kimber in my head.
Yeah. Charlie, I believe we got a jobber of the week.
We do, yes. Let's get our jobber going here. We got to put over the guys that put over the guys, right? So our jobber of the week this week, and it's Kerry Davis. And look at this two-tone haircut he's got going on. I probably should have cut out a different picture there, but he had like some blonde hair going on top of a mullet there, like a nest. I don't know what the heck he was thinking, but he was active from 1991 to 1994. He accumulated an 0-15 record. The match I was able to find of him was him getting his ass. Well, there you go. And look at those trunks. Good Lord. Really borrow those off of one of the rockers or something. I don't know. But yeah, he was getting his ass handed to him here by, I guess, ultimately another jobber in Nails, who was the ex-convict going after the big boss man at the time. But Kerry Davis here taking a shot and a couple chokeholds there. As I watched this match on YouTube, it was probably about a 5-minute match. Nails had absolutely zero ring skills. It was choke holds. It was toss him over the rope. So like I said, it was almost like a battle of two jobbers here. But Kerry Davis, again, active from 91 to 94. He wrestled mostly in the Northeast. He had some appearances in Albany and Portland, Maine, up in that area, here in New York State and also in Maine and also in Massachusetts. So again, an 0-15 record from 91 to 94, Kerry Davis. And I guess his barber is also a jobber with the work he did there on his lettuce there. So, yeah, that was our jobber of the week, Mr. Kerry Davis.
Wow.
Shout out to him.
Real quick, guys, before we let everybody go, we, of course, would like to thank our fans across all our platforms. On our home is Facebook and also on Twitter, John. We're at Count Anywhere. There you go. Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it. We're also on Spotify, Falls Count Anywhere, and also our home, our YouTube, Friends with the Z there, Media Network. You can check out not just this show, but all of John's other shows, which sounds like the guys here are going to be on John's sports show one day, maybe in the future. That should be great. And just a quick note before we get to our what do you call it, Charlie? Our public information of the week. On behalf of me and my family, and of course, all you guys here, I love you all, and we're friends, and we just don't do the show. I would like to thank everybody for their condolences on behalf of my brother's sudden passing this past week. It's been a crazy week here, but I thank you all. And go ahead.
Prayers with you and the family, Chris. Absolutely, man. It's I'm sure it's a tough loss for everybody involved there, and prayers out to you, man.
Thank you. Go ahead.
All right. This week, we're going to go with mental health. 844-794-3812. It's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Obviously, every holiday. If you're feeling depressed, if you're feeling anything like that, you don't want to get up, you don't want to continue, whatever it is, your anxieties, give that number a call. They're there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I've known people that have called and they've been able to stand. One person that reached out from another show that told me they were on the phone for 6 hours and that person wouldn't leave them. And they're all, they're specialists. You're anonymous. If you need help within your community, they'll send you there, but they're there just to listen. So call that number, 844-794-3812. If you're ever feeling that, it's just getting too tough or whatever it is, or depression.
Yeah, guys, in this day and age, we talk about, the internet and how it affected wrestling. It also affects those that, everyday life, sometimes you just can't escape because social media is everywhere. And, sometimes that just takes a toll on people. But, and guys, real quick, I just wanted to mention before we sign off for the day here, we got a couple pay-per-views already following up from last month. So SummerSlam and All In last month, which just seemed like it was this last week. Now we're going to have Payback from WWE and All Out from AEW. So we'll recap that next week. We got some title matches coming up on those cards. So we'll definitely get into that. But guys, we can't thank these gentlemen enough, for joining us each and every month. Mr. Jonard Solie, who's been a regular with us as well. when we show these clips and we get the insight from you guys, it's awesome for us. And we've told you that before, but man, I can't express it enough how cool it is for us to listen to some of these backstories and experiences that you guys have had personally with some of this talent throughout the years. It's really, really cool stuff. So we thank you guys again.
You're welcome. It's my pleasure.
Very much appreciate being on, and I love the clips. And I would like to remind our listeners that I don't know about Jonard or Wes, but I don't see these clips. I don't know who's going to be on or who we're going to talk about.
Right.
And so when Charlie or Chris shares them with us, we're going back in time and we're pulling from our long memory bank of great stories with these guys and sharing hopefully some knowledge. Sometimes it goes straight through. I don't know.
Exactly.
But anyway, guys, I love doing it with you, Jonard and Wes. So good to have you guys with us too. So thank you.
Thank you.
I'm just honored to be here with the 5 of you guys, and I know what you're talking about when we have to go back, but sometimes I think I might have burned a few more cells in my days, but it's an honor, and I really appreciate being on.
Absolutely, guys. Thanks again, guys. And until next, we'll meet again next month and do the same thing. We look forward to it.
Awesome.
Yep. Thank you. Take care.